The world watched in disbelief. Gone were the days of free-flowing trade and global cooperation. In their place, a new era was dawning, one marked by protectionism and economic nationalism. At the heart of this seismic shift stood former U.S. President Donald Trump, architect of a controversial tariff regime. Trump's tariffs on goods from China and other nations were a declaration of economic war, a bold gamble aimed at rewriting the rules of global trade in America's favor. The goal was to shrink the U.S. trade deficit and revitalize American manufacturing. But Trump's tariffs were not merely about dollars and cents, they were a potent symbol of America's changing role on the world stage. They represented a rejection of the multilateralism and global integration that had defined the post-Cold War era. The economic tremors from Trump's trade war were felt far and wide, reverberating across continents and industries. China, the primary target of Trump's tariffs, bore the brunt of the impact. The Chinese economy, heavily reliant on exports to the United States, slowed significantly. Chinese officials denounced Trump's actions and vowed to retaliate, slapping tariffs on a range of American goods. The trade war escalated rapidly, with each side raising the stakes, imposing new tariffs and threatening even more draconian measures. The European Union, long a champion of free trade, found itself caught in the crossfire. European leaders were quick to condemn Trump's tariffs, warning that they would harm the global economy and damage the transatlantic relationship. The EU responded with tariffs of its own, targeting iconic American products. The trade spat between the United States and the EU added another layer of complexity. Beyond China and the EU, other nations found themselves forced to navigate the treacherous waters of the US-China trade war. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and India, all major players in the global economy, were suddenly faced with a difficult choice: side with the United States, their long-standing security ally, or with China, their largest trading partner. Many countries sought to avoid taking sides, hoping to maintain good relations with both superpowers while simultaneously seeking to mitigate the negative impacts of the trade war on their own economies. Some countries saw an opportunity in the trade war, hoping to attract investment and boost their own exports as businesses sought to diversify their supply chains and reduce their reliance on China. The uncertainty surrounding the trade war had a chilling effect on global investment and business confidence. Companies around the world were left scrambling to adjust their supply chains, hedge against currency fluctuations, and navigate the ever-changing landscape of tariffs and trade barriers. The International Monetary Fund warned that the trade war was a major threat to global economic growth, forecasting a significant slowdown in global GDP as a result of the escalating tensions. The WTO, already under fire from the Trump administration, found its ability to mediate trade disputes and enforce global trade rules severely hampered, raising serious questions about its long-term viability. The Trump administration's trade war began with targeted strikes on the Chinese economy. In July 2018, the U.S. imposed a 25% tariff on $34 billion of Chinese goods. This expanded to $550 billion, covering nearly all Chinese imports. The tariffs aimed to protect American manufacturers and pressure China on trade practices. However, they disrupted global supply chains and sparked fears of a wider trade war. The economic consequences were felt worldwide. The Trump administration targeted the de minimis loophole, allowing small packages from China to bypass tariffs. In 2019, they aimed to withdraw from the Universal Postal Union Treaty to renegotiate shipping rates, arguing it unfairly favored China. The move received mixed reactions, with some supporting it to protect American jobs, while others feared higher consumer prices and global trade disruptions. The tariffs, more than just economic tools, were weapons in a high-stakes geopolitical chess match. They were Trump's way of trying to rebalance a relationship that he saw as fundamentally unfair to the United States. China, in his view, had grown rich and powerful by exploiting the rules of the global trading system, taking advantage of American openness while shielding its own markets behind protectionist barriers. The tariffs, then, were a way of getting China's attention, of forcing them to the negotiating table and extracting concessions that would address these perceived imbalances. Beyond the economic realm, the tariffs were also intertwined with a broader competition for global influence. China's rise as an economic and military power, coupled with its increasingly assertive foreign policy, had sparked anxieties in Washington, leading to a bipartisan consensus that the United States needed to take a tougher stance toward Beijing. The tariffs in this context were seen as one way of pushing back against China's growing might, of slowing its economic rise and limiting its ability to project power on the world stage. However, the use of tariffs as a geopolitical tool came with significant risks. Critics argued that the tariffs were counterproductive, alienating allies, damaging the global economy, and ultimately strengthening China's hand by forcing it to become more self-reliant and less dependent on the United States. Moreover, the tariffs risked escalating into a full-blown trade war, one that could have devastating consequences for both countries and the global economy as a whole. The trade war, playing out against a backdrop of growing geopolitical rivalry, injected a dangerous element of uncertainty into the US-China relationship. The two countries, already locked in a struggle for dominance in areas like technology, military power, and diplomatic influence, now found themselves on opposite sides of a bitter trade dispute, one that threatened to further erode trust and cooperation between the world's two largest economies. The outcome of this high-stakes game remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. The tariffs had fundamentally altered the dynamics of the US-China relationship, with far-reaching implications for the global order. The specter of a declining American manufacturing sector loomed large over the tariff debate. Once the envy of the world, American factories had fallen victim to globalization, shifting production overseas for lower costs and new markets. This exodus left economic devastation, hollowing out communities and fueling anger among working-class Americans. Trump promised to bring back manufacturing jobs, renegotiate trade deals, and restore America's industrial might. Tariffs were a key part of this plan, aiming to make American-made products more competitive. However, globalization had reshaped manufacturing, making it complex and integrated across global supply chains. Simply slapping tariffs on imports was unlikely to reverse these trends or bring back the manufacturing jobs of the past. The challenge was to adapt to the new realities of the global economy, investing in education, innovation, and high-skilled jobs. China, facing the brunt of Trump's tariffs, did not sit idly by. Chinese officials denounced Trump's tariffs as a violation of international trade rules and a threat to the global economy. They accused the United States of engaging in unilateralism and protectionism. China retaliated by imposing tariffs on American goods, targeting Trump's political base. Soybeans, pork, and other agricultural products were hit, affecting American farmers. China sought to rally international support, portraying the U.S. as a bully. Beyond tariffs, China aimed to reduce its dependence on the American market. Chinese companies explored alternative markets in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. China's response showcased its growing economic and geopolitical clout. The European Union watched the escalating trade war with growing unease. European leaders feared Trump's tariffs would damage the global economy and undermine the transatlantic relationship. They warned that a protracted trade war would lead to higher prices, job losses, and slower economic growth. The EU shared some concerns about China's trade practices, but was wary of Trump's unilateral approach. European leaders argued for addressing trade issues through dialogue and cooperation. The EU sought to develop a more assertive China policy, balancing engagement with protecting European interests. The EU aimed to mitigate the trade war's impact on its economy and diversify trade relationships. The EU remained committed to free trade and multilateralism. The challenge was to uphold these principles in an uncertain global trading environment. Countries worldwide grappled with the implications of Trump's tariffs. The trade war presented both challenges and opportunities for many nations. Tariffs threatened to disrupt global supply chains and reduce demand for exports. However, some countries saw an opportunity to attract investment and boost exports. Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Mexico experienced a surge in investment and exports. This economic boon came with challenges like rising labor costs and environmental concerns. The trade war had geopolitical implications, with countries navigating shifting alliances. Some countries felt pressure to side with the US, while others deepened ties with China. The global trading system entered a period of profound turbulence. Within the US, Trump's tariffs sparked a fierce debate. Supporters argued tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs and reduce the trade deficit. They contended China's unfair trade practices had cost the US millions of jobs. Opponents argued tariffs were counterproductive, raising prices and harming businesses. The debate reflected a deeper divide over globalization and its effects. Supporters of globalization highlighted its benefits, while opponents pointed to job losses. The tariffs exacerbated these divisions and broader anxieties about economic change. The debate was about fundamental questions of fairness, identity, and the American dream. The tariffs became a lightning rod for broader economic anxieties. The battle over tariffs raged within academia. Economists clashed over the potential consequences of Trump's trade policies. The debate often devolved into a war of charts and graphs. Pro-tariff economists argued tariffs were necessary to protect American workers. They pointed to historical examples of protectionist policies. Anti-tariff economists argued tariffs would harm the American economy. They pointed to the interconnected nature of the global economy. The debate became highly politicized, with each side promoting an ideological agenda. The economic impact of tariffs was complex and difficult to predict. The pro-tariff camp drew support from a diverse coalition. Labor unions argued tariffs would protect American jobs and bring back manufacturing. Domestic manufacturers saw tariffs as a way to protect their market share. Some manufacturers argued tariffs were necessary for national security. The pro-tariff camp tapped into economic nationalism. They argued the U.S. had been taken advantage of in trade deals. The pro-tariff camp found a receptive audience in Trump. Trump saw tariffs as a tool to achieve his trade goals. The pro-tariff camp stepped up lobbying efforts for more tariffs. The anti-tariff camp opposed Trump's trade policies. They argued tariffs would harm the American economy. Large retailers warned tariffs would raise prices and reduce product offerings. American farmers were hit hard by retaliatory tariffs on agricultural goods. Soybean farmers faced a collapse in demand from China. Many farmers were forced to sell crops at a loss or go out of business. Economists argued tariffs were a form of self-inflicted harm. They warned tariffs could lead to a trade war and damage the global economy. The anti-tariff camp highlighted the law of unintended consequences. At the heart of the debate over tariffs lay a fundamental disagreement about the nature of trade itself. The pro-tariff camp tended to view trade as a zero-sum game, where one country's gain inevitably came at the expense of another. They argued that the United States had been running large trade deficits with China and other countries for years, effectively shipping jobs and wealth overseas. They saw tariffs as a way to level the playing field, protect American jobs, and reduce the trade deficit. The anti-tariff camp, on the other hand, argued that trade, while not always perfectly free or fair, was ultimately a positive-sum game, benefiting all countries involved. They pointed out that trade allowed countries to specialize in the production of goods and services where they had a comparative advantage, leading to greater efficiency, lower prices, and a wider variety of goods and services for consumers. They argued that tariffs, by restricting trade, would reduce these benefits, harming both the United States and its trading partners. The reality, as is often the case, was more complex than either side was willing to admit. Trade could be both a source of economic growth and a source of disruption. It could create jobs in some sectors while destroying jobs in others. It could lead to lower prices for consumers while putting downward pressure on wages for some workers. The challenge for policymakers was to find ways to maximize the benefits of trade while minimizing its costs, ensuring that the gains from trade were widely shared and that workers and communities that were negatively affected by trade were provided with the support they needed to adjust. The debate over tariffs reflected a broader debate about the role of government in the economy and the future of globalization. To understand the seismic shift that Trump's tariffs represented, we need to rewind the clock back to 2001. This was the year China finally acceded to the World Trade Organization, integrating into the global trading system. The hope was that China's entry would be a win-win proposition. China would gain access to new markets, fueling its economic growth. The United States would benefit from lower-cost goods and a vast new market. The years following China's WTO accession witnessed an unprecedented boom in global trade. Chinese goods became ubiquitous in the West. American consumers embraced the era of cheap Chinese imports. The American economy thrived, seemingly oblivious to the structural changes underway. However, the rosy predictions of shared prosperity proved overly optimistic. While China benefited, the U.S. trade deficit with China ballooned. American manufacturing jobs disappeared by the millions. The backlash against globalization began to boil over. Working-class Americans bore the brunt of the job losses. They saw their communities hollowed out and their way of life under threat. They felt betrayed by the political and economic elites. Trump tapped into this deep well of resentment and rode it to the White House. Section 2. The Great Unraveling. The global trading system, built post-World War II, began to show cracks before Trump's election. The 2008 financial crisis exposed the fragility of the global economy. Countries turned inward, adopting protectionist measures. The spirit of international cooperation gave way to a zero-sum mentality. The rise of China strained the global order. China's economic model fueled anxieties in the West. The U.S. viewed China's rise as a threat. Trump's election marked a turning point. He campaigned on economic nationalism, promising to put America first. He viewed globalization as a rigged game, his solution tariffs, trade wars, and a retreat from multilateralism. Trump's actions sent shockwaves through the global trading system. His tariffs upended trade norms and sparked fears of a global trade war. His administration weakened the World Trade Organization. The Trump administration's actions were part of a broader trend of rising populism and protectionism. From Brexit to right-wing populist leaders, there was a growing backlash against globalization. This backlash threatened to unravel the rules-based international order. The long-term consequences of Trump's trade wars and the unraveling of the global trading system remain to be seen. However, it is clear that the world is entering a period of profound economic and geopolitical uncertainty. The COVID-19 pandemic, which swept the globe in 2020 and 2021, further exposed the fragility of global supply chains and the interconnectedness of the global economy. The pandemic also exacerbated existing inequalities both within and between countries, fueling social unrest and political instability. The war in Ukraine, which began in 2022, added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. The war, which pitted Russia against Ukraine and its Western allies, led to a sharp rise in energy and food prices, further disrupting global supply chains and exacerbating inflationary pressures. The war also heightened geopolitical tensions, raising the specter of a new Cold War between the West and Russia, with China potentially playing a pivotal role. In this uncertain and volatile environment, the future of the global trading system hangs in the balance. Will the world retreat further into protectionism and nationalism, leading to a fragmentation of the global economy and a return to great power competition? Or will countries find a way to cooperate and rebuild trust, forging a new era of global economic governance that is more equitable, sustainable, and resilient? The answers to these questions will depend on the choices that countries make in the months and years to come. The stakes are high. The health of the global economy, the stability of the international system, and the well-being of billions of people around the world hang in the balance. Section 1. The Unfinished Symphony. The saga of Trump's tariffs is a chapter in a larger epic about globalization. It's a story rife with contradictions and unintended consequences. Trump, aiming to make America great again, may have hastened its decline. By weaponizing tariffs, he undermined the global order, ceding ground to rivals like China. The economic fallout is undeniable. Supply chains were thrown into disarray. Businesses grappled with rising costs and uncertainty. Consumers felt the pinch in their wallets. Some sectors experienced a resurgence, others were hammered by retaliatory tariffs. The true cost may be measured in trust. Trust between nations eroded by acrimony is not easily rebuilt. The rules-based trading system has been shaken. Globalization is now viewed with suspicion and skepticism. The problems Trump sought to address may be exacerbated by his measures. The global economy is here to stay. The challenge is to make globalization work better for everyone. Section 2. Charting a new course. As the dust settles on the Trump era, the world finds itself at a crossroads. The old order is crumbling. The new order is yet to be defined. Some will retreat into nationalism, building walls. History teaches us such policies are self-defeating. Embrace interconnectedness, update trade rules, work collaboratively to address global issues, invest in education and training, mitigate globalization's negative consequences, balance national interest with global cooperation, embrace complexity, engage in principled diplomacy, commit to multilateralism for global solutions. The stakes could not be higher. The future of the global economy hangs in the balance. The choices we make today will determine our future. The time for wishful thinking is over. The time for decisive action is now.
So hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and let's turn the page on a new adventure together. Get ready to experience books like never before, only on VBook 360. Like, comment, and share to support the channel and keep the video magic alive. Thank you for stopping by. And remember, every video has a story, and every story deserves to be shared. See you in the next video.